Hello all and welcome to the Rails board meeting. This is Friday, February 24th, 2023. I am Alex Mancina, president of the Rails board, and I call this meeting to order at 1 p.m. Emily, would you please call roll?
Sure. Monica Caldecott. Rosie Camargo. Alice Creason.
Here.
Juanita Harrell.
Here.
Robin Hellenthal.
Here.
Diane Hollister.
Here.
Renee Leva.
Here.
Jennifer McIntosh.
Here.
Julie Milovic.
Here.
Becky Spratford.
Here.
Thomas Stagg.
Here.
Beth Tuppen.
Here.
Alex Mancina.
Here.
Vanessa Villarreal.
Here.
And Karen Voidick.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Emily. On to recognition of guests and announcements. Since we have a in-person quorum, we do not need to do roll call for every vote. We'll handle guests and public comments at the same time. Let's start with guests here in Burr Ridge.
Monica Harris, Rails.
Cindy Robinson, ILA.
Joe Philippek, Rails.
Ann Slaughter, Rails.
Sharon Swanson, Rails.
Are there any public comments in Burr Ridge? If not, next we have East Peoria. Any guests in East Peoria?
Hello, Kendall Orison, Rails.
Hi, Kendall. Any public comments in East Peoria?
Not at this time.
Thank you, sir. On to the State Library. Do we have anyone from the State Library on?
Gwen Harrison
Yes.
will be joining us, I think.
Very good. Let's see. Emily, would you please read the names of any guests on Zoom?
Sure. It's myself, Emily Feister, Ryan Hebel, Galen Ilev. Joe Philippek is online and in person. Mary Witt
He's an overachiever.
and Layla Heath.
Are there any public comments from Zoom participants? If not, Emily, did we receive any public comments by email?
We did not.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to move any items from the consent agenda to the regular agenda for further discussion? If not, may I have a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved, Julie.
Julie, thank you.
Second, Juanita.
Juanita, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Opposed, no. Agenda is adopted. Next, we have Sharon Swanson with the financial report.
So good afternoon, everyone, and I'm only available in person, not online. I do not match Joe's overachieving attitude. So you will find in your packet the financial statements for January. The January 31st general fund cash and investment balance of $23.8 million would fund approximately 22.9 months of operations. And that's approximately, in comparison to this time last year, an extra $3 million that we have. Revenues through January of $11.8 million were approximately $2.26 million above budget. And of course, this is primarily due to the January 18th receipt of our fifth Live and Learn grant payment in the amount of $1,072,500. And since January, Rails received our sixth Live and Learn payment, and this was February 7th. So we are on track for the third year in a row to receive our entire fiscal year 23 grant within the same year of the award. And in the past 2 years, it's been by May, so we are definitely on track for that yet again. And this over budget revenue is also due to investment income, which is $410,596 through January, and this was $365,236 above the budgeted amount. As you know, interest rates do continue to rise. The Federal Reserve once again raised their interest rates by 1/4 percentage point at their meeting, which was February 1st, I believe. And this increase was the 8th increase since March of this last year. But this 1/4 of a percentage point increase was much less of an aggressive approach than they've taken earlier this year with the 3/4 of a percentage increases that were like 3 months in a row. And that being said, the Federal Reserve has now expressed quite a bit of uncertainty as to when these increases will eventually stop. So they are taking a less aggressive approach to inflation, and there's a signal that we're nearing the end, but who knows where we'll end up at this point. And I did want to focus a little bit on the investments. I know I let you know this last month that we were in discussions with PMA and getting their recommendations since we were approaching our second of 4 maturities for a series of laddered treasury notes that we purchased a year ago or so. So we did follow through with what I'd mentioned. We reinvested that amount of money plus the interest, the principal plus the interest in 4 2-year CDs instead of 1-year CDs to lock in this high in interest rates for an extended period of time. And we locked it in at 4.32% average interest for those. And this interest rate is tracking very closely with the current interest rate for Illinois funds, as well as the money market account that we have with Hinsdale Bank and Trust. Expenditures through January of 8.4 million were approximately $556,000 below budget. And of course, this was again primarily due to lower contractual services expenditures. And this was due to lower than budgeted increases in our delivery outsourcing contracts. So renegotiating that has saved us approximately $80,000 to date from what we budgeted. And of course, the variance was also due to a shift of the cataloging grant opportunities from member libraries that want to join an LSAP. The whole process is being retooled, but we do expect to award most of the $80,000 that we budgeted later on this fiscal year per expressed interest that we've heard from members. Personnel also greatly contributed to this under budget amount. And of course, this is primarily due to the delayed hiring for our 3 newly created positions, as well as our current vacancy for an associate executive director. During January, Rails did purchase some additional equipment related to the new power array to power the servers and the switches that we purchased earlier this year. So that you will see in the capital fund. And I did want to especially note some recent events with our delivery service vehicles. Unfortunately, this will have an impact on our vehicle expenditures. So Rails did very, very recently experience a catalytic converter theft at 2 of our locations. And unfortunately, the vehicles that were vandalized at Bolingbrook had twin catalytic converters, so it's doubly as expensive to replace those. These expenditures will begin to show up in the February reports, but the silver lining in all of this is that we have submitted insurance claims, and the Bolingbrook thefts can all be consolidated into one claim, one event. So there's only $1,000 deductible that applies to that. And Rails is pursuing installing cages, anti-theft plates, etching the catalytic converters to prevent this from happening. And we're also trying to fit as many delivery vehicles as possible into the buildings to park them, but we are crowded as is, so a few will have to be outside, unfortunately. But that's just about all that I have for you. Do you have any questions?
Do we have, Renee has a question. Do we have security cameras in those locations for the parking lot?
Yes, we do. We have security cameras in all the locations, but the film was very, very grainy until we can't even tell if it was a man or a woman that did this. There were 2 people that we can see, and it took them all of 17 minutes. One kept watch while the other one got under the vehicles with a sawzall and sawed the pipes to get them off.
And we, just to add to this, we were in discussion with police officers who responded, and they said that the pattern is often once they discover a space where they can get catalytic converters, that they come back. So we made that decision to invest in all of that, the cages and the additional security measures in case that does happen.
It's going around. They're stealing catalytic converters from. It's like the thing to steal.
Yeah.
No reason to like copper pipes. Now it's like catalytic.
Yeah.
I'm glad we could consolidate it into one claim, though. That saves us a lot of money.
Yes.
Yes. Julie and I are both on the LIRA board, executive board, and that is who we have our insurance coverage through. So we are grateful that that is how that claim was handled.
And also another pattern that was pointed out, because Illinois is trying to crack down on these things. So most of these thieves come from neighboring states that aren't as harsh when it comes to these things, and they take the parts to neighboring states that don't necessarily have as strict laws when it comes to scrap yards accepting a bunch of catalytic converters at once, because obviously these people stole them if they have that many.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Next, we're on to reports, and I'll start us off. Have an announcement. Like to congratulate Juanita, who has accepted a position as Executive Director with LaGrange Park Public Library District. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So that's the good news. The sad news is that Juanita will be leaving the special library seat on the board. So we're very happy for you, but you'll be missed. Thank you for your service this past year, and we do have a certificate. We'd like to present on behalf of Rails. Thank you for your service.
Do you want to say a few words, Juanita?
It's been a lot. It was surreal being on the board and interviewing for Monica's position, while at the same time knowing I was doing it on the opposite end. It's been, and I couldn't speak about either one of them, so it was very, very surreal. But I'm very happy that it's happening, but I am going to participate in the board. Give me a couple of years. When I circle back.
I get to be right next door to her, so I'm so excited.
Wow. Juanita, I wish you all the best. I wish that I'm so glad that our paths crossed together through the Rails board, and I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have committee reports. There were some changes. The Resource Sharing Committee report emailed to the board earlier this week. Just with clarification, are there any other additions to the reports? If not, next we have Monica with the Rails monthly report.
Thank you, Alex. Before we jump into what you'll see in the Rails report, we did want to just touch on some changes that are going to be happening with remote meetings. So I know many of you are probably aware that there are changes because the governor has announced his intention not to renew the COVID-19 disaster declaration beyond April, which means that it will expire on May 11th. After that point in time, we will return to the same kind of provisions via the Open Meetings Act that the Rails board has always been under when it comes to public meetings. And so we just want to make sure that everybody has a lot of time, to think and prepare in return for how that will work. We typically have a good amount of people in person in terms of our own quorum between all of our Rails locations. But in addition to that, as an option, a board member or committee member who attends a meeting by video or audio conference can also provide notice to the recording secretary at least 48 hours in advance to the meeting, as long as they are in a public space. And we can also add that to the agenda, which means that that would also be added to the quorum that was available. So we will be available for questions as to how, the board will approach this. We anticipate this will be more of an issue when it comes to the Rails board committees, because many of those committees have met entirely virtually for quite some time. And so that's where we anticipate there will be more of a learning curve to returning to this. But if you all have any questions at all, please, by all means, please let us know. And if anybody has any questions right now, we're welcome to talk about that.
I just want to say something out loud to make sure I'm correct and also to get it out there. So basically, as long as you go to your library and you're in a space that the door can be open to the public to do Zoom, that would be okay.
As long as it has been reported to
you,
us.
right.
At least 48 hours in advance. Is that correct, Emily? Just in terms of
Yes,
your
and
own
I
understanding?
do want to clarify, 48 hours is the very minimum. Of
Yes,
course,
thank you.
we're scrambling then. So really, when
Right.
you get the notice, you'll probably know ahead of time. And again, we only need 8 people in person, either, and obviously now we have, 12 people in person about, so. With this board, again, we've not really had that problem at all. Even, we would have matched the requirement most of our meetings throughout COVID even. I mean, when we started meeting again, but 48 hours, if you can tell us 4 days in advance, that's great. And of course, the agenda has to be posted at your library where you post agendas. At the building.
Thank you, Emily.
It's good though for us to know so we can communicate to the committees as well.
Yes, and we will be in all of our upcoming committee meetings, be sharing this and making sure everybody has lots of opportunity, to answer questions. We just anticipate, again, a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to some of those. Okay, so moving on, I just want to share a couple of highlights from the report. We are going to be having a series of upcoming meet and greets with the new Rails executive director, which is me. And so those events are targeted in several different areas. So for right now, the areas that we're currently targeting, and this will be over the next 3 months, although we're working on the schedule right now. As you can imagine, it's a lot to try to fit into everybody's points and making sure that we have all of that in place. So we've got Bourbonnais, here at Burr Ridge, Coal Valley, one of the northern Chicago suburbs, Peoria, Quincy, and Rockford. And then in addition to all of those meetups, which are intended as in-person meetups, I'm also planning a series of site visits to individuals on the Rails board. So administrative support will be in contact with many of you to try to set up one of those meetings. So I have an opportunity to meet with you in person at the libraries that you represent. And then we are also planning visits to our Rails delivery hub so we can meet directly with the staff there as well. So we're excited about that and just wanted to share that with you all so you have an opportunity to know that those are happening. You are more than welcome to attend, although of course it's not required, but we would love to see you there, especially in some of your geographic areas if you can. We are also looking at succession planning. So in one of our conversations that we had with our policy committee, Renee made a great suggestion about looking at a formalized succession plan, which we think is a really good idea. And so that is something that we are going to be looking at with the policy committee first. There is a really great example of a succession plan in our service area through CCS that was developed in 2021. Some of you may have seen that already. And so we're going to be going through that as well as looking at some other examples of succession plans that might be good for an organization like ours and then work on developing that. Once that goes through the policy committee, it will of course come to you all to look at again, but we just wanted you to be aware that that's something that we're working on. In addition to that, we've also been evaluating some of our financial processes with Sharon. Sharon's been very diligent about going through that and presenting best practice and making tweaks where we can. She's been in her position for a year and is very nearly fully staffed, and we're very excited and some of that moving forward. So we're very excited to move forward, but just wanted you all to be aware of that as well. Joe and I also recently met with Biz Lindsay Ryan just to talk about ongoing EDI efforts in fiscal year 24. We just want you to be aware that she will also be attending the April board meeting to present on some of those efforts. So we're excited to share some of what we have coming up with you, but we're glad to be able to meet with her as well. I am very pleased to have sitting next to me, Cindy Robinson from the Illinois Library Association. Cindy's a little later on the agenda, but we wanted to make sure that all of you were aware of some of the great legislative meetups that ILA is doing right now. They had their first one, the Get Ready to Advocate session on February 22nd, which was last Wednesday. And then I noted that you also posted a recording of that.
Yes.
Anything you want to say about that?
It is under the advocacy menu, and we recorded the whole thing with the questions also. And then we have our follow-up on Monday, and that is for new legislators. And so we're going to kind of explain the Illinois library ecosystem, all of the partners that make things go. And we'll also have presentations from our legislators. And thank you so much, Rails, for putting together a list of stories for us. We've got some really great stories from around the state. And I'm very excited about it.
We're excited too. And so if you did miss the session from earlier last week and want to go back, you can go and watch the recording. It's very exciting because there's a whole second part to that where where ILA is really asking people to go out, speak to their legislator, and then report back to ILA with some of the things that they talked about. So we wanted to encourage all of you to participate in that as well. And then if you can, you could still register to attend the Library 101
Yes.
event that Cindy mentioned, which is for Monday, right?
Yes, and that won't be recorded because legislators don't really like to.
They want to be
recorded. So you have to be in the room for that one.
I'm signed up.
Excellent.
Excellent. And so I will be at that one as well, and I'm
Great.
excited to be there and hear it.
Heather Jagman and I were practicing right before I came. We ran through our scripts.
It was really good on Wednesday too.
Oh, good.
It went very smoothly.
Great.
We wanted to call your attention to a recent Sparks podcast interview that we did with Chris Brown, who is the Chicago Public Library Commissioner. Chris was there to talk about their book sanctuary project that they're doing, but then he also shared some things about the upcoming 150th anniversary, or well, it's current, the whole year is the 150th anniversary of Chicago Public Library, but they've got a lot of great events coming up, especially in the summer. So if you had not have an opportunity to watch that or listen to it, I would. Chris has been a great partner for Rails over the last year, and we're really excited to continue to work with CPL in that way. We are also excited about a joint staff meeting that we are planning with the Illinois Heartland Library System. I know we talked about this a little bit last month. Leslie and I have continued to meet on this, and we also now have a tentative date for moving forward at the very beginning of June. So we're thrilled to have the opportunity to all get together. We're going to be at the Illinois State Library because they have generously allowed us to have that space to share. And so we'll have the chance to meet together to talk all as a group, but then also for people to kind of split off and talk to the people who are doing similar work to them in different systems. So we're looking forward to that. And then what else we'll be able to do to partner together as we move forward. So just wanted to share that with you all as well. And then just looking forward to next month. So in March, we will be bringing to you a budget amendment. And as we noted in the report, that will reflect the staff compensation changes related to the tentative contract that was approved by the board at the special meeting on March 7th. So we didn't have enough time to put all of that together by this meeting, but we will have that for you to look at in March. Let's see what else we have. In addition to that, you saw in that this month of Rails, there's the top 3 things that we were here to talk about. One of them is our special member update. So that is coming up next week on Tuesday, February 28th from 3 o'clock to 4:30 p.m. That is going to be a member update that is focused on the hiring of the new executive director, but we're also asking Rails members to think about 3 questions. What do you like best about Rails? If you could add a Rails program or service, what would it be? And how can Rails communicate with you more effectively? And we'll be talking that through at that member update. Checked with Mary Witt this morning. We currently have 191 people registered for the member update, which is a lot. So we're excited about that and looking forward to being able to share that as well. And I just wanted to call your attention to a few things, including some of the new Rails networking groups that are happening. So there's 3 new ones that are launching currently, but one in particular, the Social Work and Libraries Networking Group, is very interesting because it's part of a partnership with the Alliance for Human Services and the DuPage Federation of Human Service Reform. So this comes out of some partnership work that we've been doing with them. So there's a chance for people who are doing social work in libraries to meet together and talk about that, but also have some input from social workers who are working in the field in this area. So we're excited to see how that moves forward and wanted to share that with you as well. There's a lot in here, including a new social media analytics piece that we're sharing with you, just so you have a chance to see where the reach is there. And wanted to share, of course, a few more things. And this is also with ILA and the Trustee Forum. But the Trustee Forum finalized 3 spring trustee events for March, April, and May that are on library buildings, finance, and running efficient board meetings. So again, if you are in a trustee role or you want to recommend this to your trustees, we want you to know that these things are happening. We know there's been a lot of call and need for more trustee events throughout the state. So we're excited to have those as well. Anything else you want to share about
They
those?
start next Saturday.
Yes, very soon.
Yeah.
Right. So that is my Rails report. Any questions from anybody about anything that was there? Okay.
All right. In that case, next we have CE report from Joe.
Good afternoon, everybody. I guess in person and on my computer. doesn't work, but, give me a moment here. to share My screen. I'm going to talk to you, yes, about continuing education and specifically getting into a bit more sort of feedback and how we are trying to get there. So there are, as you can see here, a number of aspects of the Rails strategic plan that have implications for consulting and continuing education services. So I put a few up there. I mentioned our obviously support through training efforts around EDI, CE that's going to align with our My Library Is campaign and articulating value to stakeholders. And also the ability to offer continuing education around anticipating future needs. So these are obviously things that we're going to be working on that's going to drive the sort of continuing education we offer to our membership. And some of this I would have went over during the board orientation. But just as a reminder, ours is a department of three, myself, Diana Rush, Martin Schmidt. Our model is that we seek out and contract with outside presenters to deliver CE content to our members. Those are professional consultants, subject matter experts, and our very talented membership, where we have a lot of people that can provide some level of continuing education for us. So we look at member feedback, which comes through our networking groups, when Dan does site visits. I'm sure since I started talking, I've already gotten 2 emails asking when Rails is going to do something on the paid leave for Workers Act, which we're working on, but members reach out with those sort of direct requests. And I mean,
It's a big deal.
yes. So we are working on it. Of course, trends across our member libraries and the library field as a whole, all those sort of external forces, whether it's a piece of legislation, whether it's the per capita grant and things that libraries have to do to respond to the application, or all those sort of like out of the blue things like First Amendment audits or like COVID or all those things that we have to be responsive to. And of course, staff and board that serves as sort of an opportunity to share with us what you are seeing across member libraries that helps inform us on what we should be offering. And, part of it too is a kind of balancing act that we have to do with offering the sort of things that our members always need, whether it be like customer service training for trustees, FOIA, Open Meetings Act training, but then offering new things and anticipating. So it's always a balancing act when we're trying to decide on these things. So these are kinds of things that go into making those decisions. But the question that should follow eventually becomes the question, I guess, of impact. And to what extent are we making an impact on our membership, on all of our services, of course, but with continuing education in this case. So I think for some Rails services, we can draw a pretty straight line between for impact. So you take deals and discounts as an example, and we can look at like the money that we're saving our members. We can look at the volume of delivery that we do and see how much is going from library to library. But with continuing education, I think it's a little trickier. Did that customer service workshop make someone 20% better working with the public? It's a harder thing to assess. But at the same time, as this is also taken from a strategic plan, it's something that we do have to do. And additionally, you can't simply look at attendance and how many people are attending to find value. Because if you see you have an increase of 20% more people attending one year to the next, maybe that just means you're wasting more people's time. If the content is not sound, if it's not delivering the CE that they want. So again, as you see in our strategic plan, this is really essential for us to do for all of our services. So of course, this is an example of one of many of why we have Grant and Jeanette here, of course, at Rails, from our data analysis team, helping us to find ways to do this assessment. And when you see the words impact and survey together, you know that Grant Halter is going to be involved. Which he absolutely was. So beginning in 2021, Grant started working with our team to develop an evaluation tool that would help us really get more useful data. In pre-grant PG times, we might call them, we had a survey that was very much, did this meet your expectations? And talking about like the post-CE event survey. Did it meet your expectations? How was the presenter? Very general information. And it spoke more to whether they like the event as opposed to like the benefits and the impact outcome. So Grant helped us overhaul the survey design to ask questions that would really speak more directly to outcomes instead of those more general impressions. So we started using a new survey tool in January of 22. So we have about a year's worth of data. And of course, as we're accustomed to with Grant, he always creates a fabulous dashboard that we can play with, but also use. So it's both fun and very informative for us as we think about how to respond to this feedback in the CE that we offer. So I wanted to just pull up the dashboard and like I said, play with it and show you everything, but because of time and because there's often a delay as you go from chart to chart, I just wanted to pull out some things to show you all, to give you a sense of some of the data we're seeing and just so you know the kind of things that we're looking at. So for all our CE events, we're going to ask some questions that get to skills in some way. And you'll note one thing you'll notice is that the order is a little skewed. That's something he's still playing with the dashboard. Usually you expect the most positive to be at the top. So there's a little bit of work there to be done. But so there's a general question just about skill set and whether the event that they attended in any way improves their skills. Obviously, some events for all these questions lend themselves better than others in terms of skill development. Another general question, helping plan to implement a new service or change in process at the library. And I would say a lot of the CE that we try to offer is about trying to, positive change, adaptation, etc. So this is a question, again, for all the CE that we do that we're going to offer. And then the connection piece, we know that there's often a networking component to continuing education that provides a platform for our members to connect to one another. Now, it's not surprising to see that over half are saying not applicable, no improvement, and that just sort of speaks to the limitations of webinars and doing things online, that you don't get the connection you do when you go to a conference or have a workshop. So that's something we have to sort of think about as we think about future CE and figuring out that balance between the convenience and the inclusivity that is available through online versus the connecting that members want to do. Also in that kind of sort of general questions we want to ask regardless of the type of CE, or this question's kind of around motivation and how is a CE event motivating people to learn more, inspiring them to do more? And so we wanted to develop some questions based on that. So one is simply motivation to learn more about this topic. And I think when we talk about a topic like EDI, that of all the things that you can't just check a box with one webinar and say you're good, EDI is among them, and the desire to hopefully inspire people to action and to learn more and to exploration, etc. So we want to get to some of this motivation. Sharing, in a perfect world, I think we want people to take what they learn and share it with their colleagues, again, to kind of spur an additional interest and motivation. So a question about their willingness and want to share with their colleagues. And there's kind of a bucket of those motivation questions. And we also recognize that we have a lot of CE that fits into certain topical categories that we might want to ask questions related directly to those topics. So we're thinking topics like marketing, HR, legal, trustee training, EDI. So we came up with some questions for those core areas that will be asked specifically based on the type of event. Again, a few examples. So we talk about trustee training. We spend a lot of time talking about role and wanting trustees to understand their role, what it is, and just as importantly, what it is not. So a question that sort of speaks to how well that event is helping them understand their role. HR legal, helping them understand policy procedural changes that they may have to consider based on the content. And that's, a lot of the HR source ancillary content is hopefully driving. some of that. And then among the things we asked related to EDI is about engaging staff and, you know, while some of the content may be directed at more personal growth, we really want to try to see an outcome that leads to discussion amongst their colleagues that can really spur in some of those systemic changes that we know are necessary. Now, all of these are those questions that you get, you know, in that immediate like survey link that'll pop up or it'll be in your email in 24 hours. But we're thinking about the fact that people seldom can go the next day and start doing all those changes. It takes time. And so what we wanted to do is also a very short follow-up survey weeks after they attended to basically try to get at some of those outcomes that maybe came a month after they attended and see what, if anything, they're doing with that content. So Grant helped us in developing this very short follow-up survey, just a few questions basically to those who express a willingness to receive it. One of the questions is simply, what have you used, if anything, that from what you learned from the event, have you used anything? And in some ways, this is the most important question of all, to really get at, you know, what, if anything, they've done. Now, the 18% that haven't used anything, you can parse that a few different ways. Is it still useful to learn something, even if you're not directly using it? I mean, there's a lot of sort of thought that goes into that, but really, I think that's something that we'll be benchmarking and striving to always show that people are using something they learned at their library. That's really the purpose of what we're doing. Did you try something new because of this event? Sort of equally, that's what a lot of our CEs, hopefully what we're trying to drive our libraries to do, is to innovate and to implement new, again, programs, services, processes, etc. And then the one sort of time we ask an open-ended question is to that last question. If they did try something new, what is it? Could they tell us? And so I pulled a few examples. We got a lot of responses and I'm still kind of working my way through them, but just for some examples, one of the webinars we did on sort of around accessibility, somebody that expressed, you know, thinking about that as they create content for their website, this sort of heat map concept that came up during one of our space planning workshops. A couple comments from EDI training that we've done over the past year, pronoun use, allyship, and comment related to disaster planning and kind of making a team. And then this one, I think, related to Jamie Rackland's presentation on sort of inflation and how libraries need to be thinking about that. Becky, I know there was a comment, someone had a lot more horror authors to read now. So
I forgot we did that. That was with Rails. It was with art and Rails. Yeah.
Had a hand in that.
Awesome. I went to the one about Accomplice versus Ally and loved it too.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And we got, we got a lot of responses, which is great. And I'm still sort of digging into this. But, you know, from a survey standpoint, you try not to have too many open-ended questions. We want this to be a short survey, but this is the one place we really felt like we wanted to see the range of things that people are doing. Again, as we talk about being able to tell the story. So as I wrap up, just a couple last things I want to share. This chart illustrates the representation of responses that we received from the survey, which is obviously it's a lot of blue, which means it's a lot of public library responses. And I know that last month you heard Jeanette speak about the Service Inequities Project. And this obviously speaks to some of the work that needs to be done and the importance that we are intentional about getting feedback from members across all of our member library types. And, you know, this chart does not represent the attendance at those events, but I'm pretty sure that when we begin, and this slide is kind of just to wrap up as things that we're going to need to do moving forward. And as we work with Jeanette on her project, really taking a close look at who's registering for these events, who's actually attending the events that register, where they're located, what type of library, what position are they in, all those things as it relates to that Service Inequities Project. And when we find an imbalance, really thinking about causality. Is it how we're marketing? Is it too narrow of a focus for the topic? I mean, there's a number of different things, reasons, and we've obviously had conversations around that before, but to have some data to look at would be helpful. Our CE archives is something of a blind spot for us. So that is where all of the recorded content, we know that a good percentage of our membership experience our CE through the recordings. But we, up to this point, don't have a lot of data that we can look at to see. We can see how many are doing it, but who are they? So we're going to have to think about ways that we might be able to find some of those identifiers. We haven't done a broad membership survey regarding CE since 2019, I want to say, basically just to get more feedback on what people are looking for. And in particular, coming out of the pandemic, looking at that sort of in-person versus virtual online option, which probably changed how people are thinking about that and their desire to have one or the other or both. Monica mentioned these meet and greet member sessions where we're going to have a chance to hear from our members. And I find that anytime we're asking them about what Rails can do, there's usually some kind of CE consulting implication. So I'm sure we'll be getting many notes from you, Monica, about that. And then the EDI cohort feedback. I mean, it's what I think one of the things we're learning through this cohort is there's really a wide range of needs and expectations around the kind of content that is going to be most helpful for members and most impactful. So when that cohort wraps up in May, talking to those 40 people and having a robust assessment to really help inform us on what we should do moving forward regarding EDI for our membership. So that is what I was hoping to share with you. I know I'm out of time, but I'm happy to hear any comments or questions.
Joe, this is Monica off of Zoom. I have a comment and or a question. The idea of maybe co-branding some CE sessions. I know just speaking from the school library viewpoint, I often look to our state organization, ISLE, for CE. But I wonder, rather than asking presenters to kind of, recreate the wheel each time, could there be a benefit to saying, this CE is sponsored by multiple organizations? We have a good partnership going with ISLE, and maybe that could be something that will attract more school library members to, at first, perhaps a co-branded CE, but then perhaps in the future, now that they get and see what's going on, they'll see more of the wide range of CE that Rails offers.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what the program Joe was commenting on. I forgot that was for Rails, the horror program. It was actually co-branded with ART, with the Adult Reading Roundtable.
Mhm.
So that's basically how Rails has been doing Readers Advisory, is with Adult Reading Roundtable because of the pandemic and the programs being virtual. And I think it's grown for both parties. That's a great point, though. Because I forgot that was Rails, but yeah, it was.
Right. But specifically for schools and our great desire to sort of do more, and we now have a relationship with ISLE through our partnership meetings and the work we're doing, that there's no reason that couldn't happen. And Monica, I definitely understand the potential benefits to that. So definitely a great idea. Thank you.
Joe, so on the Rails website,
Yes.
if you go to the continuing ed space, I don't see much listed there. Everything's really in L2 now, right? Is that the reality
Yes,
of the situation?
and there is some like pulling of information that go from L2 to the website, and I'm not sure what that process will look like with the new website, but there may be, and part of it is just sort of the way things are categorized in L2 and how they then get labeled on the website.
Mhm.
But we'll look at that, because that's obviously one place that
Right.
people are going to go to find.
Because I mean, the question that was on my mind is actually addressed by the filtering options in L2, but I don't think about that when I'm usually thinking about, it's something that usually comes through the newsletter, like the
For
Rails
sure.
updates, linking me right to something. And then when I go to the Rails website, I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect. And the comment I was going to make was that I think we're doing a decent job of saying this is something that's appealing to an academic audience or public or a school library. But of course, within our organizations, there's a lot of diversity of position and responsibility, right? So I feel like there's something we could look at an operational level, how to do a better job of making it very visible to, this is who I am, and here's how I find the stuff that's relevant to me and my role within the library. Like those options are here in L2, but I'm feeling functionally like there's a disconnect maybe right now, possibly.
Thank you for that.
And we will be seeing more excuse me,
Yeah.
more with the new website next month that I think will show a little bit of what's possible in that arena. Cause I know we've had
Good.
some limited discussions around what that's going to look like in terms of how it will be filtered for different audiences to see. But I think it's a great point.
Yeah, if you can't find it, you can't
Right?
sign up for things.
Yeah.
You know, or you don't know about it.
Yeah, I have one other comment that came to me earlier, which is I feel like in many organizations, I feel like I struggle with this in a leadership position. Building the infrastructure around how do we as an organization take advantage of sending our people to opportunities, right? I think there's best practices that we could maybe share out about how to, some of it's just common sense, like if you're gonna take the time to take somebody off of their regular duties to send them to a workshop, then you should have them report out at the next group meeting on what they learned, as opposed to keeping that all siloed in their own. I mean, it's common sense stuff, but then I don't think we always follow through on that. And I think here's how your library can best maximize the value of this time that you've spent
It's
learning things like.
moving beyond just hoping they are going to share, but maybe be able to provide some tools or template or whatever to help spur that to happen, I guess.
Yeah, I know I struggle with that. It's like send someone to a conference and try to remember to have them report on what they learned, but it's not happen. And what other good strategies are up? How are other people taking diffusion of knowledge? How are they doing that well?
But
Right.
Jennifer, to piggyback on that, this is Becky. We do that, for example, at LaGrange, we have a really great model where people have to do it's like a 3-2-1 model. But only on things we've paid to send them to, and a lot of these are not paid.
Right.
I think that we should give some guidance to libraries that anytime they send people to any sort of training, there should be some sort of reporting function. Because I know we don't really require it if they're just doing a Rails training, but it shouldn't be just. You know, I think that's important.
I'm not sure putting like sort of mandatory structures around these things.
No,
I
but-
always think showing a template of where people
Exactly.
are getting the maximum value out of something. This is what they're doing. You know, think about adapting this approach to your.
Especially if we're asking questions later, like how did you use it? This is a good opportunity to have people have discussions, like encourage people when they finish to share an idea with somebody at work or to, yeah.
So when I worked at Oak Park, whenever we went to different meetings or conferences, when we came back, we did learn why you earn.
Yeah.
And so we would present on whatever topic we learned, and it was not necessarily mandatory. I just think we had an unusual amount of people willing to do it. So everybody did to learn why you earn. We would come back from the conference and we do it, and then people would attend, and then we report out that way.
Yeah. They're doing it well, but I'm sure we all aren't. I mean,
But I think guidance would be great for people to justify making time, because even for free things, it's hard to make time.
Right.
Yeah. I think asking feedback questions a few weeks later is a great idea to build in that component to make it something people want to send people to as well, because we're actually asking, how did you use it? So if they're thinking that to answer it, they're gonna be like, oh, how did I use it? And then they're gonna go and say, hey, this is what I just did. But so sometimes by asking, you trigger that in people to actually go use it.
And hopefully they don't click the N8 button.
Right, well. Yeah.
I was even just thinking about how on an agenda, if you have a standing agenda item on planned meetings that says, this is where we share out something we learned independently.
I love that.
And you be thinking about it. This is hey, here's the new cool thing I learned.
We should have a program about how to share what you've learned. I mean.
It's called show and tell. I did that.
I mean, I'll talk about doing it after I'm off the board and I can get paid to do it, but I'm not gonna do it now.
Hey, Joe, I do
Yeah.
have a question. This is
Yeah.
Karen. Is there anywhere, like, say, somebody not on the board
Sure.
just has an idea of something they would like to learn? How do they go about letting you know about that?
Just any.
Just anybody. So it's not like me, I just go tell you. But if it's somebody else that,
Suggest. and I-
yeah, where is there a suggestion box on
So we
here?
never
Is there
had-
somewhere to type that in? Or how would you do
Never
it?
really had, that's an interesting, surprise we haven't thought of that, just like a form.
Great idea.
That's
I
why
guess
we're
maybe
here.
it was because I already have such a long list of member like lists. But that, is sort of more other than just emailing Joe or, the CE department in general. a sort of
Because otherwise, how
standard
do you come
form.
up with ideas of topics.
Right.
They're topics that maybe are important to you, but maybe they're not as important to everybody
Sure.
else. Or something you didn't hear about because you're not in the trenches,
Right.
so to say, you know?
But again, so you are talking about Rails members, but just basically for them.
I'm talking about like the individual libraries or school libraries, you know, that are in the Rails family
Sure.
that want, like, it would be really nice if we could have some CE on this. How do they tell?
To kind of have a
Yeah.
presence on the website or some form.
Yeah,
Almost like
something.
ask a librarian.
Right.
Usually most.
Ask for a program.
And I know like Joe gets a lot of regular comments or emails that are coming from people. I know I do too. We pass them on. But again, a lot of those are people we already have relationships with through other networks and who feel
Yeah, if you
comfortable
just go on
reaching
the
out in that
Rails
way.
network and you're
Right.
looking for
Right.
Mhm.
suggest a program.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, well,
or
it makes sense
something.
because like libraries have suggested purchase buttons.
That's
This
true.
would be like our version of that.
I don't know, it just might
Oh,
surprise
for
you.
sure, and it's, then it's just kind of the, because we get a lot of requests for programs that just aren't because of the cost or whatever else, just not like feasible, but it does also allow us to identify trends, even if we can't do anything.
Right.
And particularly for school libraries and others, that, again, just don't have the familiarity.
Right.
It gives them that, so thank you for that suggestion. Right, well, heard a lot of good suggestions, so thank you, everybody.
If I could, I just want to have the opportunity to thank Joe and especially his team for all of the continuing education work that they do. We heard very frequently in our strategic planning sessions how important continuing education is to Rails members, and having access to that, especially for free, is really important to a lot of folks. They had to be very nimble during the pandemic to be able to present on topics that people immediately needed to know about, and I really applaud this kind of evaluation going on. So as we step into kind of this next phase of what people want and need from Rails when it comes to continuing education, that we're ready. So thank you.
Yes. And but a lot of kudos to Grant Halter, of course, who really just has helped us in thinking about how to this very difficult thing of assessing CE. So shout out to Grant as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Next, we have State Library. Gwen?
Good afternoon, everybody. I have 3 things to report out on, so this is going to be a very brief report. Regarding the school district library grant program, we have reviewed all of the fiscal year 2023 school district library grant applications, and award letters will be forthcoming. We've been getting a lot of calls and emails. Where is my money? And so we want people to know that the award letters will be forthcoming. Second of all, we are wrapping up the review of our public library grants and expect to award in March. So that's good news. And then finally, the system area grant applications will be forthcoming. And that ends my report. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Have a good Friday.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you,
news.
Glenn.
Thank you.
That's good news.
All right, we're on to new business, starting with the communicable disease policy.
Thank you.
Monica?
Thanks, Alex. So you saw in your packet, along with a memo, a copy of a Rails communicable diseases policy. So just for a little bit of background for you all, those of you who've been on the board for some time will remember early in the days of COVID-19, we did have a policy that was specifically related to how Rails would approach COVID. We then made an amendment to that policy. And so the last time that it was approved was on October 22nd, 2021. In looking at our current practice and making sure that it aligned with what our policy had and was in place, we also, when looking at that policy, decided that we wanted to see a broader focus for that policy that would include all communicable diseases and how Rails would approach communicable diseases in the future that might have a similar impact. So this came to the policy committee, who reviewed this policy and recommended at their February 8th meeting that it be recommended to the Rails board for approval. Jennifer, is there anything you'd add about this policy or this process?
I know, I think you've covered that. I mean, we definitely did have suggestions that were incorporated, particularly with regard to which agencies, organizations should be referenced in terms of making decisions in response to any future event. So I think that language was well vetted, and we had some good discussion about like how specific there should be and how it gets into things like vaccination requirements. Not like we really steered away from a lot of that more binding language and tried to keep it more in terms of like what is the structure of how decisions will be made. Yeah. So I feel very comfortable with it. I think the committee did as well. So strongly endorse it.
Any questions or comments on the policy from the board?
I thought it was very well done and was looking at it as a model
Yeah.
for our upcoming policy updates that we are doing, and was like, oh, we should have it. So
that's something we've talked about in the committee. It was like, wow, when Rails does take the due diligence to talk to, risk agencies and talk to lawyers and get all of that input, these can become models that we can make a point of saying, hi, we've done this legwork. Feel free to really look to these as models for your independent libraries.
We're good at sharing in libraries.
I will tell you, looking at it, I was like, listing all those diseases, I was like, oh, but I mean, but it made me realize, I'm like, why haven't we had this before? I mean, because let me tell you, flu season years ago was not fun at the library anyway, right? And so I'm really glad that we're leading on this, but also it is important to not just leave it behind because COVID ended, but to incorporate it into policy going forward.
All right. May I have a motion to approve the communicable diseases policy?
A motion to approve.
Renee, thank you.
Second.
Alice, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next up, we have the board election and nominating committee. Alice has agreed to chair the committee again this year, and Renee will be our other board representative on the committee. Still in the process of confirming additional non-board members for that committee, and expect to have a report on that, progress on that at the March meeting. Monica, did you have anything to add?
The only thing I would say is that, I wanted to thank the board again for the great discussion that we had on board diversity at our last meeting. We also had some additional follow-up with the policy committee to talk about recommendations that we would be making to the nominating committee based on that discussion. And so we just want you to know that that has all been incorporated, and then the nominating committee will move forward with some of those suggestions and discussion.
Thank you.
May I throw out one comment? And I apologize for being a broken record, but I think I'm just going to say it again. I know that in the past I have brought up the idea that that there's one seat for school board, for school librarians, and I understand that the way that Rails was set up makes it that way. But can I just continue to say that maybe it shouldn't be that way? Maybe there should be steps that our organization takes to make our governing board more equitable for the membership. So I think it's one thing to say, oh, well, that's just the way it is. Like that's just, that's the way we were formed. And it's another thing to say, we're gonna try, we're gonna see what it takes. If diversity of membership on the board, if diversity of library type is important for board, then we should work on that and not just think that our hands are tied and not take any action if action were possible.
Thank you, Monica. I do want to share just in terms of the upcoming seats that are open on the board. There just because of the way that this election has fallen, there are no at-large seats up for election during this particular election, which maybe makes comments like Monica's or some of that discussion is very important, and it's something for us to continue to consider. There is a school seat that will be voted on, as well as a special and an academic seat. The other available seats are public trustee seats, which are mandated by law, as Monica alluded to, in terms of the number that we have to have on the Rails board. So this will be an ongoing discussion that we will continue to have about the makeup of the Rails board election and how that should look into the future.
It's almost a blessing in disguise, though, because now we have time to really talk intentionally about those at-large seats a little bit more, since they have more leeway, especially because I didn't know that. That's good information. Thank you.
All right, next we have the Secretary of State Transition Report, Library Enhancement Committee findings. Monica?
Thank you, Alex. So all of you hopefully had an opportunity to read through this report. I think it's a very exciting report. So what I want to do is just give you a few highlights, but I'm going to skip over a lot of things. And then I just wanted to open it up to the board for discussion, comments, things that you noticed and want to see. But I think one of the most exciting parts about this report is how much it aligns with a lot of the priorities that have already been set in terms of the strategic plan and have been noted by the Rails board as things that are important in Illinois. I am very thankful to the committee, the Library Enhancements Transition Committee that was chaired by Heidi Smith, for the work that that committee did in making sure that some of these issues that are very important to Illinois libraries were addressed and made clear so that the secretary had a really good understanding on day one of what these issues were. And so this was really exciting. So just in terms of the general committee findings, which is the first part, I just wanted to point out that first challenge and an opportunity for that opportunity to improve equity of access to libraries and library resources also really specifically mentions the unserved, the 1 million unserved that are in Illinois. And again, very encouraging to see that and see that noted as an issue that libraries have noted. Secondarily, and a thing that I know we're all thrilled to see on there was the desire to provide a statewide resource package, which is something that we're going to talk about a little later in the agenda. So I won't focus on that too much, but it's very exciting to see that. The desire to support freedom of thought and diverse stories. So everything that we've been talking about with materials challenges and banned books also definitely appears here. The shortage of qualified librarians and library media specialists. We had a little bit of discussion about this at the advocacy committee meeting, and I think this really relates to that very real need that every school in Illinois needs a certified librarian. You can see that in the What We Heard section. There's a little bit of discussion at the advocacy committee about what the right way to approach that issue might be, and can continue to talk about that, but it was good to see that reflected here as a high priority. And then also the acknowledgement of inequitable funding and issues of inequity in general in Illinois for how libraries are funded and sourced, and what could potentially happen about some of those things. So out of that came some pretty specific recommendations, ones that I will highlight that again align very clearly with some of the things that have already been approved by the board in terms of the strategic plan, are those that desire to strengthen collaborative relationships with our partner organizations like the Illinois Library Association, who's here today, but also with Heartland, with Chicago Public. So it was great to see that here and that they're supportive of that as well. To use the Illinois State Library budget to provide a statewide library resource, which I know we would all love to see. The advance of technology adoption and digital resources to automate internal procedures. And there's a lot of excitement there about what that could even mean. So there's a lot of potential. In the strategies, you'll see a lot of these things reiterated with what some of the both short-term actions and long-term actions might be in order to solve that. And again, a lot of processes that our members have asked for, that we've been excited about, that we've had in conversation with the state library about things that are important. So a great report, and left me feeling very hopeful and excited about the potential for what the future might look like. So I wanted to open it up for discussion from you all, just in terms of your own reading of this report. What stood out to you? What were you excited to see? Or what do you wish would have been here that wasn't there?
Well, I know one of the things that came up in the advocacy committee that you already mentioned is, the way it was worded, that bullet point, create an environment to attract and retain certified librarians and library media specialists it's like, well, that's not really the issue. The issue isn't retention, it's hiring and staffing. It's like, because there are no library media specialists at so many of our schools. So it was just kind of like, they kind of got the issue wrong in that bullet point, but it's close, but not quite there.
Some continued conversation maybe on that point. Yeah.
But otherwise, I thought, the report is very encouraging, and I think it hit, all the things, all the major issues that we've been talking about.
I appreciated not just the level of detail, but the depth and the acknowledgement of the short-term, long-term, all that, because it showed it wasn't just window dressing. It showed that there was actual thought put into it, and what was achievable and what was going to be worked on.
Yeah.
And of course, I loved seeing that they want to use the Secretary of State budget for database funding, because that was when Dee and I started talking to people originally, trying to get something that you could, some states have had this problem, like you get it into the laws and then we have to have a minimum of 5-year commitment, or they won't even talk to you, and then you have to redo it. And so that commitment is very nice.
Yeah.
Gives us a different route.
Yep.
And it came up this morning at the ILA board meeting, executive board meeting as well, that whole concept of it has to be, that cannot be taken. There's a lot of fear around statewide database package that would then erode funding for other things.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that if that is pursued, it needs to be funded as an additive, not as part of the funding. we
Yeah.
already
Right.
Correct. So it was great to see that.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I also really loved the collaborative idea. Forgot this, you didn't highlight this, but the whole idea of taking some of the duplication of services such as voter registration.
Yeah, yeah.
Having libraries and Secretary of State offices or access of Secretary of State. As someone who was a voter registrar for many, many years and literally had entire 8-hour days where all I did was register people, which I loved, but to have that cross working together.
Yeah.
That is great. And it made me think of things that aren't in here, like lots of libraries do passports. Why aren't we doing passports at secretaries? Like, you know, it just made me think of that idea has never been looked at. And I know he's trying to make the driver's facilities better anyway. That's one of his big goals. I loved seeing those ideas. And that wasn't even something I thought about.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, same, like the idea of the DMV kiosks, I was like, huh, like, like, I would use
it's a great
that.
place for that.
Yeah, it's collaborative and innovative.
Mhm.
I worry a little bit about competition between some of these priorities, because even though the database package is a big complex thing that needs lots of advocacy, in my experience, when people want to address library issues, it's easier to just write a check and say, here, we bought you the thing you wanted to buy. There's more stuff that you can offer, as opposed to the more challenging question of how do we create capacity in school libraries, which doesn't have, you can't just allocate resources and fix it. It's a
Right.
complex problem that requires politics, infrastructure, education, and money. It takes all of that. And I could see those priorities. We might end up winning with the database package, but potentially at the expense of other things that are just far a little too out of our reach almost. And okay, we took care of you libraries, you got your databases. Now I'm gonna focus on something else. I worry about that because one is just so much easier to address, even though it's expensive.
Yeah, Renee. So great, it's awesome, but I also have the mentality of like the cup is half empty, and the only reason is because I always I expect everything that's unfortunate because it happens. But with these lists, sometimes it's, I think political wise, where a person who's coming in who doesn't know the area, I'm like, this is awesome, this is great, phenomenal. But at the end of the day, I think we, as Rails, we should really look at the end of the fiscal year to see what has been achieved through that administration, to making sure that someone's being accountable essentially for what's being promised to us. Because at least we know at the end of the year saying, all right, 2 things were checked out of this whole list at the end of the year. But in 5 years, do we go back to the list and say, you know what, now that we think about it, it was a phenomenal list, but none of it has been covered. So I think it's just making sure that we go back to this list at the end of the year to say what has been covered, what has not, and who should we be contacting to making sure that they're still on it. That it's not just, hey, you won the election, great. Here's your list of things that we think we're gonna do. We're just not promising. It's just, these are things that we think we wanna accomplish. And like Jennifer said, I'm like, if we get our resources, is it a win-win? I don't think so, because a lot of the schools may not need that or may need assistance somewhere else. And so, yeah, that's just my thought.
Thank you for those comments. And I think one thing that this does give us to do as Rails is an opportunity, because once we see these kinds of strategies and highlights outlined, and especially in the cases where they outline or they're highlighting work that we would really like to see done as well. When we propose these kinds of projects or maybe propose additional grant funding through the state library or other places for some of these things that we would like to happen, being able to tie them back into this kind of an operational plan that the secretary would also like to see moving forward makes it a possibility, right? To be able to see things that maybe we otherwise wouldn't have the same kind of impetus to move forward. So I think that there's always like a place for glass half empty and glass half full, right? And I think that there's different ways to approach this in ways that we can both work with the secretary and also make sure that these things stay top of mind, because these are important things, right? And we know they are.
All right, let's see. Next, we are on to unfinished business, discussion about the March and April board meetings and possible travel for those. Emily sent out a poll to gauge interest in traveling for the March and April meetings. Emily, do we have results to share?
And I actually have them, so I'll share them with you all. And so thank you to all who were able to fill out that survey and report from Emily. So the results, oh, and thank you, Emily. Emily's sharing them as well. So you can see the Cole Valley meeting and dinner, you know, kind of edges everything out by one vote in terms of who responded, and for the April meeting. So that was the most popular response in terms of what we came back with. But you can see there were some others that were also nearly as popular. So just to reiterate, the choices were between traveling to either Peoria or Cole Valley on either the March board meeting date or the April board meeting date. And this again is to accommodate the desire of the board to meet outside of the Burr Ridge location, or have the main have a meeting at someplace outside of the Burr Ridge location 3 times this year. So in order to do that, we have to get started in the spring, just to make sure that we have enough time throughout the year to do that regularly. You'll recall our last meeting that we had offsite at another location was in Peoria. We haven't done that in Cole Valley in quite some time. We did do a member update in Cole Valley, but not the board meeting. And so that's one thing to consider as well. But wanted to open it up for discussion from the board in terms of what you would like to do for both the March or April meetings. Both locations can host at both of those dates.
Either of those dates worked for me. I didn't know if anyone else had a preference. I voted yes on either option. Actually, April would be a little bit more convenient.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to go overnight in April because I'm hosting an event at Oak Park Library the night before, so, but I'm more than willing to travel. I was willing to go if it was just to the meeting, if it was in March and not stay over, but I appreciate the offer to be able to stay over.
Do we have anyone who has not responded that would like to say whether they can go to one that would skew the dates or anything?
I do prefer the April meeting. I'd have to do some schedule stuff to make the March meeting work for a travel day.
Thank you, Julie.
April, yeah, me too.
I'd also say the April meeting would be better because March is still to stay overnight would be difficult, depending on where we went.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
for
on April then, unless someone has another.
Yeah, this is Monica. I would just say that my school district will not allow me to be out of the building on that March date because it's the Friday before spring break. So I would not be able to come in person.
That's a good point. That is required in schools.
Mhm.
Yeah. Also, April gives more time too. Like that was the other issue, like
The planning time.
the planning time.
That's true.
I think knowing it 2 months in advance is much easier for people.
And just as a note, we will continue to have the Burr Ridge location open for anybody who would still prefer to attend from Burr Ridge. So that's still an option for you. This is just the travel meeting that we have done generally in the past.
So is April the preferred option?
Cole Valley, or we don't know yet, still Cole Valley.
Yeah, we didn't talk much about Cole Valley versus Peoria. Do you want to
I
discuss
mean, I'm all for
that?
going to Cole Valley because we did just go to Peoria. I feel like that's more equitable, but
That's true.
No, there was more for Cole Valley on the April date.
Yes, that's what the most votes received were for Cole
It
Valley.
was
in
8
April.
versus 6 people.
Mhm. Thank you.
Monica,
Hi, Tom.
and in reference to the Cole Valley location, it might be kind of neat, the people that are staying overnight to set up a visit to the new Rock Island Library and the East Moline
Yeah.
Library.
I could come early, that'd be awesome.
Oh, I wonder if we could do that. That's a great idea, Tom. Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Rock Island just opened a branch that is a shared space with a YMCA. So very innovative, pretty interesting option.
They have waterproof books.
I might have to do that.
Do they really care?
No.
Oh, you said that. I was like, what? That's amazing.
Karen being smart.
Because of the pool. I'm sorry, I'm
Oh,
a
I
little
think of
slow
the
on the
pool.
uptick. I haven't heard that.
That's cute. I'm all for that. I would come early.
Oh, we could see what
Cindy
we
lets me
can
out of my
arrange.
committee meeting. That was supposed to happen today.
I'm sure
Well, it's a
Angela would welcome the
Yes,
opportunity.
it's purpose for me.
It'd be fun.
It's a great idea, Tom.
I think we should just invite Cindy.
Well, we should. Yeah.
So we're hearing a lot of support for the potential for Cole Valley in April.
Yeah.
Is there any disagreement on that front? And we will still have opportunities to visit Peoria and some other locations as well this year.
I've never been to Cole Valley.
It'll be fun.
All right, it's
Been to
planned.
Rock Island. I've never been. Excited.
Right, so we'll plan for that in April.
Thank you.
Next up, we have board development progress report on statewide access to electronic resources proposal. Monica?
Thank you, Alex. So what you saw in your packet was a proposal for statewide access to online resources for all Illinois libraries that was updated as of last July 2022. So I know some of you have heard a lot of these points regularly, but we wanted to have the opportunity just to kind of go through them again and talk about them, especially because it was in the transitions report, and we think that there's a lot of excitement and interest in that going on kind of around the state, especially when you read through some of those comments that came to the transitions committee. People were very specifically sort of calling that out. So, you know, as you can kind of see in the proposal, the ask was for $5 million annually for a product, because that would be equitable to some of the kind of surrounding states in terms of per capita for what it would cost to actually have a good product that would serve, you know, the entire population of Illinois, including those 1 million unserved. Rails actually did a survey back in November 2019, and we haven't talked about this in a while, so we also just wanted to make sure people had an opportunity to look at some of the results from that survey. We did invite member libraries of all 3 systems to respond to that survey, so it was not just Rails members. So we had Heartland and Chicago Public Library System folks were also encouraged to do the survey as well. And you can actually see the breakdown in terms of who responded and what money that they have to spend on online resources. So you can see in that 2019 survey, 17% of respondents had $0 to spend on online resources, which means they have nothing. So when we're talking about an online resource package and what it would potentially save those members of Illinois, you can see back the last time that from when we pulled these numbers, there was $28 million in these kinds of online resources that was covered just in public libraries. That doesn't even cover what school libraries, academic libraries, and special libraries are paying for these kinds of items. But that also doesn't include the many, many, many libraries that have nothing. They have $0 devoted to this at all. You can also see some of the online resources that were identified as being potentially the most critical. And one thing that we wanted to note is that we were really impressed with the response that we got from school libraries on this survey. It was much higher than what we have often gotten. And we think that is also indicative of the fact that this is something that would be very useful, helpful, and important to school libraries. And so they cared about this and they wanted to let us know. So it's, again, just another thing to make sure that you're aware of when it comes to some of these. This kind of appropriation would make sure that all Illinois libraries and the 1 million unserved would have access to high quality information resources, no matter how small or underfunded that library, no matter what type of library. And it would ensure a minimum standard of resources for all Illinois libraries. And that can mean a lot of things. I'm from Michigan originally, and so I kind of came up on MEL, which is the Michigan Electronic Library. Worked in a very, very small library when I first started out called the Northfield Township Public Library. And in that library, which was just in one house, that's one of those libraries that wouldn't have been able to afford to have a single electronic resource. But because of MEL, the patrons of that library had a chance, to have access to all of these important electronic resources that they otherwise would not have had. It was a real opportunity. But because everybody had the same ones, it also presents an opportunity for training because when everyone has the same resources, you can also centralize training of those resources, marketing of those resources. And so it brings opportunity across a lot of different fronts when it comes to how that can work. And then for those libraries that are spending money on these resources, those dollars are precious and they could do other things with those dollars that would serve their communities. So it could be spent on critical programs, resources, including staffing that would also really, really help out their communities and those savings. So it's one of the reasons why we think that, Illinois being one of only 2 states in the entire country that does not have access to this resource, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to continue to be one of those 2 states because we know the kinds of impact that this could have for our state and for the users in our state. We also just think it's an excellent leadership opportunity, which is why we're so excited to see that in the library transitions, report in terms of that understanding of how that could also be a place to lead and that could really benefit kind of everyone. It's one of those kinds of win-win, situations for everybody in Illinois. So that's just kind of an overview. Again, a lot of you have heard this before, but we are passionate about this issue and we know you are too. So it's a great opportunity. If you were able to see those talking points, this is a great chance for if you are talking to even your local legislators about why something like this might be important through the advocacy process, keeping these in mind and kind of front and center for the kinds of things that you could say and let them know for why something like this might be important, regardless of your library type. To your library, it's going to be really important to have going forward. But with that, we have a very special guest here today. I'm very excited to introduce Cindy Robinson, who's the Executive Director of the Illinois Library Association. And Cindy's going to tell us a little bit about what measures the Illinois Library Association's Public Policy Committee has taken regarding statewide electronic resources.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. Excuse me. So this is our top priority for this year. And we have 2 board members here today and a past board member there. Oh, 2 over there.
past board members.
Sure. Overwhelmingly, it was, everybody supported this. So it is our top priority. We are in a little bit of a holding pattern right now. As you probably know, last week was the State of the State address and the budget address. And all of the other elected officials, statewide officials, were re-elected. So they had their budgets ready to go, but the Secretary of State is, the new kid in town and is still working on the budget. So that will be out next month, which is next week. Although that doesn't mean it's coming out next week, right? Sometime in March, his budget will be out, and that's the first thing we're going to be looking for. He has indicated that he supports this initiative and that there would be ongoing funding. So that's where we are now. We're kind of in a holding place. I have talked to some of his staff. They clearly care very much about libraries, which is great to know. And very supportive and excited about what they can do for libraries. So we're really just sort of waiting for that, but we're optimistic that we will have this in place within the next fiscal year.
Can I ask a question? So we're waiting for him to see if he puts it in the budget like he said he would. I'm going off Renee here.
Yes.
So thank you for your leadership on this. But now my question is, because, I'm sure I'll hear about this at ILA too, but if it's not there, we don't have recourse. Do we go the legislative route? Do we hold it off another year. Like, I don't even know what happens. Like, do we know what happens? We don't know. Okay, so we're gonna fingers crossed and figure it out. Okay.
Yes, Derek will tell us what to do.
Derek will tell us. Derek is very good at telling us what to do. Because I don't even know, like, if we, yeah. Okay, okay.
Derek is our lobbyist.
Yes.
There's Gwen.
So, yeah, okay. So it could be as easy as he puts it in there and then we start that process, which we've talked about at Rails, where we get stakeholders together to actually figure out which exactly, okay. Now Renee has me all nervous.
It's good to have
No, it's
that
good.
perspective, yeah.
There's only one, there's always has to be like at least one person with.
No, I appreciate, Renee, I appreciate it.
Well, Cindy, we have such an awesome opportunity to have you here. Is there anything else you want to tell us about ILA? What's going on? Anything you want to share?
Well, is there anything you'd like to know about the process or how the Public Policy Committee operates? So it's a committee of members, but we also have ex officio members from Rails, from Illinois Heartland, from Greg from the State Library, and Craig from Carly, and
Carolyn Cassell.
I'm sorry, I'm blanking. And we also IL. So we have representation from all around the state. And the committee begins its year in July. And they begin discussing like what are the issues that we need to deal with, and what legislation do we need to look at, and then there's another meeting in August to prepare for this, and then the committee presents their slate of ideas to the board, and the board reviews them. We invite people to come to the board meeting in September to talk about their proposal. The board then votes on it, and that what they vote on becomes our agenda for the year. And so this year we have the databases. We have a proposal to change the way records.
Local records.
Yes.
It's like very important, but very like,
yeah,
in the weeds.
Exactly. So in the weeds.
Like a records keeping act.
That was when that one came up, everybody in the room went, what? Like it was a lot of excitement about that. So we'll see how that goes.
And then there's another one about like money, being more flexible.
Yes, the other one is about being able to change for district libraries to be able to transfer funds from one
Special
account to
fund
another.
to another.
Exactly. And that is something that may take a little longer because it's a difficult thing to explain, and figuring out legislatively the right way to do that. So that will probably we likely won't have any movement on that this year, but hopefully in the next year we can kind of get that sorted. So that's where we are with that.
In regards to the Local Records Act priority, I know that was one thing that I highlighted when I was going back through the report, is that there's that advanced technology adoption and digital resources. And one of their short-term actions was to explore ways to digitize and automate paperwork requirements. And I just thought it would be really exciting if we could also align that with some of the work that was happening there. It's really cool.
I will say one of the other things that PPC does that I was not aware of until I was on the board, is they compile a list of basically like every bill that could possibly relate to libraries in any way, and they're monitoring them, which I knew that happened, but I would always wait to see like what got reported out at ILA meetings in minutes but I've had a chance to see all, and it's fascinating to see what is going on. One of the things I'm excited to see is our state looks like it's trying to be a leader against all of the states that surround us, and to be proactive about requiring access to diverse materials in schools, as opposed to like Missouri next to us, who is literally going to fine people money if they give a diverse book to a child. So there's like multiple bills right now. And of course some of them are just there to make the people look good, but it is nice to see leadership, and I feel like we have a political will at the state level to do those kind of things, and it would be a really nice statement. Those of us in libraries who are sick of seeing all these states making it harder, if we could be a state that led and made things easier. So I hope that like ILA ends up hopefully supporting those things going forward. We're just
And
monitoring them.
We, you can submit as many bills as you want,
Yeah,
right?
no, I
So
know.
We've seen many bills that are like the bills we're seeing in other states are being submitted here, but they won't be moving along. They won't be going anywhere.
Because some of these look like they might actually, and I know Cindy mentioned to me that some of them were discussed with ILA when they were, talking about them. So these are things that have chances that I'm also very excited about. You all can sign up to be on committees,
You can.
It's open right now.
Right now.
Anybody can be on an ILA
Yes.
committee. I know, I've been on committees before I was on the board. It's really a great way to be involved, and it's way fewer meetings than this. I'm just gonna tell you.
Renee is currently on.
Yeah, Renee is on a committee.
Yeah.
Conference
the
committee?
conference
Yeah.
committee?
Yeah,
Awesome.
I knew that.
Yeah.
I've been on conference.
It's actually doing a presentation at Reaching Forward South.
Oh, good.
Yeah, on the pros and cons of owning a bookmobile. And
Oh,
do
cool.
outreach alternatives, so it should be a lot of fun.
Nice.
And then we'll be submitting a proposal for ILA in Springfield, even though I'll be participating in that. For hopefully, I'm working with a dealership to seeing if he can provide incentives for libraries to purchase an outreach vehicles to then extend outreach to their communities. So a lot of what happens a lot of times is once you hit 25,000, you have to go to bid. And a lot of the outreach vehicles, there's maintenance.
Yeah.
There's everything else you can
That
think
makes
of.
it so much harder. Yeah.
So what I did in my library, we did that at-home delivery service where instead of doing just homebound, we just deliver books to people's homes. I spent roughly about 27,000, but that 27,000 included 6 years worth of oil changes, 6 years worth of tire maintenance, 8 years worth of warranty, and the vehicle is only like 6 months old. So, and then with the wrapping job and everything together, about 28,000. But I want to work with this dealership to seeing if he's able to create some package for public libraries so that they would be able to help support these libraries, have outreach programs without having to go over $25,000. And so that's something that hopefully I will get them to do, to then bring to ILA for Springfield and seeing if that's an opportunity.
What a great idea.
I know, how interesting.
So, yeah.
And that's actually a good thing for future thinking about the law with 25,000, because if you're getting like 7 years of something, let's say, you could actually monetize that out over different years and
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
not hit those requirements.
So my maintenance instead of
Yeah.
15,000, which
But
was
that's got a
real,
legal
1,000
implication that we
per
can
year.
think about too. That's interesting.
But anyway, yeah, I'm fond of Violet.
All right. Thank you, Monica, and especially Cindy for joining us today. Next up, we have Rails board member reports. Does anyone have any news from their library they would like to share?
I do.
Karen?
The Shorewood Troy Library is closed today and tomorrow, closed, all the way closed. We are remodeling. They'll open Monday, kind of under like COVID-like conditions, outside delivery, because they're all new carpet, all new paint job. Once they take the carpet out, the building's old. There's like one outlet in the whole room, it's just really hard. So we are having an electrician come and put those floor outlets, like, I think 9, which is gonna be really nice to have those in and then, oh, the fire doors to go outside, it rains and it comes in. So they leak a bit. So, there's 4 main fire doors that they're gonna replace and put with the little thing.
Oh,
One of them to get, because now it's a key, so it'll be electronic so
RFID,
that
yeah.
you can, So it's exciting, but it'll be that limited, only outside delivery till like April 20th. So it'll be a long time, but exciting. Very
Their
exciting.
director was posting before pictures.
Yes.
Cannot wait to see the after.
Well, I mean, the stuff they're doing, other than the carpet and I mean, where is she gonna take pictures of all the plugs? Ooh, look,
Yeah,
all
but
9 of them.
libraries does that.
But just moving things.
Yeah, well, they have
Yeah,
a company's moving the stacks, but I mean, just cleaning out their little office things. They never use the offices. They just, each of their offices, pretty much, they shove their crap in there. So they had to uncrap themselves, like, all the boxes and take it home. Once you take it home, you get rid of the stuff, you know, and then you have space, and it should be really nice. It really needed it. So,
Congratulations, that's exciting.
yeah, it's very exciting. Watch.
I'll announce for ILA, the submissions for conference are open. It just went open. So they're due April 4th. So if you want to submit a program, you should do it. Tom and I were working on soliciting trustee programming.
I'm glad you ended the sentence, or you kept going after soliciting.
Oh, soliciting programs. Tom and I had a
I
committee
know.
meeting for the trustee forum, and we are actively asking people to, we were taking ideas from presenters that got great feedback. We even had a presenter who asked for his feedback and then came back with a proposal. So, so we're trying to do that, but they are open right now. So please get all your ideas in, because sometimes you put an idea in and maybe they combine it with another idea. So don't think, even if you think it's small and you don't think you can do a whole program, put the idea in. Renee will look at it.
Yeah, we're part of the conference committee. We get all that.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. I've been on it before. Trust me, you don't, even if your idea is small, it's worth sharing.
Make sure you give yourself enough time.
Yes, yes. And get those in, please, by April 4th. We need
Similar to Karen, we are doing a workroom renovation project, which has been amazing because it has forced both children's services and our technical services departments to clean out everything because theirs were the workrooms being renovated. So the two largest the library have to clean out all their spaces, and it's amazing what stuff they got rid of, and how much more space they're gonna have in their new spaces.
So you're having a craft sale?
And it has also given them an opportunity to reorganize, which has been wonderful. And yeah, so we are halfway through that project.
There's a lot of projects.
We always have something going.
Well, everybody's talking about cleaning out all their offices and things like that. At Alpha Park, we did approve a new circulation area and approved the funds for it. And we're trying to get it in before summer reading. So Alex, we may call on you next week to get things done quick.
Good luck. I hope it works out for you. We are all done with our drive-up window except for the window at LaGrange because
now you can wait.
We've been waiting. Everything's done. March something. We're getting the window, but we've been done for like 2 months. So good luck.
Well, I have construction projects underway at both of my libraries. Helen Plum is getting ready to move to our new location, which is about a couple of blocks from where we're at now.
Exciting.
We are closing for the move on March 9th. We're expecting to close for about 4 to 6 weeks to move and get set up in the new space. And we'll be opening sometime in the second half of April. Grand opening is scheduled for the weekend of the 22nd and 23rd.
Make sure you tell us all. I totally
Yes,
come.
yeah, absolutely. I will mention it again next month when we're a little bit closer. So we're very excited about that. It's been a long time coming.
Yes, it has.
Yes. And New Lenox as well is in the middle of a renovation of their first floor. We're taking about 1,000 square feet of what used to be staff space that was kind of underutilized and expanding our digital media lab, opening that back up for the public. We're adding some additional study space on the first floor. And the building's a little over 20 years old now. There are things that were just looking a little bit worn, and it's finally getting a little bit of a an opportunity to freshen things up and open up some of that space for the public. So we're excited about that. That is almost done. We're planning a kind of grand reopening for that space on the first floor. Also in April, the following weekend, April
You're gonna be
29th.
busy.
Yes, they were originally scheduled for the same day, which was going to be. Fortunately, there was some delays and New Lenox got shifted back a week. So now it's April 29th. And yes, I will definitely mention that again next month. Everyone is certainly invited to come to either or both.
Yeah.
I told my kids that the library was going to be closed for about a month to move everything. And my youngest just said, why would it take a month to
Oh.
move the books? I'm like, there's a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah, the moving part
I
will go
don't
pretty
know.
quick. We should be pretty, couple days of packing, a week for moving, and then probably
Setting up.
3 to 4 weeks of, yeah, unpacking, setting up. Lot to do, but we're excited.
That's so
Be involved.
cute.
It's just like, look, put the books out. I'm like, it's not that simple.
Hey everyone, mine's the opposite. We're celebrating our grand opening of South Holland Public Library tonight. We're celebrating Black History Month, our grand reopening, and we're doing it through Wakanda Night. We have sold all our tickets, so we are at over 100 and something people are coming, but everyone is welcome. We have photographers, photo booths, cosplayers, prizes, a STEAM. It's called Shuri STEAM Lab for the kids and the youth services. So it's tonight at 6. Everyone's welcome. I unfortunately can't be there because I got COVID. Yeah, I know. I'm okay. The scary part was like they thought I had pneumonia, so we're trying to stop that from happening. But my voice is back and I'm doing well, so I'll miss the big party, but everyone's welcome to come.
Hope you feel better soon, Rosie.
Yes.
All right. Next, we have our meeting recap and agenda building for next month's board meeting. Our next board meeting will be Friday, March 24th at 1 p.m. That will be regular location. We'll plan for April to be in Cole Valley. We have our member update coming up on the 28th of February. We'll have an update on the nominating committee and the upcoming election process at next month's meeting, and hopefully have some good news about the Secretary of State's budget and the e-resources package. Is there anything else for next month's agenda?
We're gonna do the website, right? Is that next?
Yes. So we'll have a demonstration of the website and also an update on the school library data project.
Good. All right.
It's like plenty.
All good things. Is there anything else to discuss before we adjourn? If not, this meeting is adjourned at 2:42 p.m. Thank you all.